live on YouTube and Facebook with Dr. Tanya Paynter. We're going to talk about migraine. So I know that's a really, really common topic everywhere, but we're going to dig into it today. Welcome to my show, Tanya. And I'm so grateful to have you. And the reason is there are lots of people, including my mom. She's suffering from migraine so many years. And the only thing she does is just taking Excedrin and other pills for a temporary relief. And I told her about the functional medicine and how naturopathy can help her. So hopefully I can explain this to my mom as well.
That's right.
Welcome.
Well,
Yeah,
thank you. I'm glad to be here.
yeah. So tell me about yourself, what you do, and then why migraine?
That's a good question. Yeah. So my story probably starts way back when I was 16. I was rear-ended in a car accident. And that's when my headache and migraine journey started. And so it began with just kind of intermittent head pain and then progressed in severity and intensity and frequency. And so by the time I was in college, I was having a headache every day to varying degrees. And then they would flare into bouts of migraine, however often. And so I struggled with that for about 15 years through college, through, my intermediate years. I was a law enforcement officer. So I would be on patrol with just massive headaches and trying to, manage that. Then I went to medical school. And one of the driving forces behind that, I always wanted to go into medicine. So that was always the dream. But, then there was an extra special piece to it. Like, how can I fix my own headache issues? And so it took me, a good 4 years of really understanding the biochemistry and digging into some of the research and kind of doing my own studying on my own headaches. And so I became very intimately familiar with the topic. And then when I went into primary practice after graduation, I always loved when people with headaches would come in because I knew, like, hands down, I knew what to do with them, right? And so it was always just really fun to be able to see them improve and start to kind of gain their life back. And that's kind of just the trajectory took me to starting to specialize in migraine and headaches because I've been able to, I understand it so intimately, both personally and professionally, that it's just something that I really enjoy, helping people get over because there's not a lot of resources out there past medications that don't work in 40% of the people. So,
Yeah, that's interesting because migraine should have different solutions, or it should have different causes actually, because to my understanding is because body is so complicated
right.
and is not only just a headache, it should be some hidden layer there. So how do you identify these layers? How do you find if somebody has migraine? Do you track the symptoms, or what do you do exactly?
Yeah, you're right on. There are so many things that we have correlated with migraine, but it's different for every person. So somebody might have an issue with hormone and cortisol and serotonin, and somebody else might have issue with dopamine and detoxification and, something else. So it's really, we know there's a lot of things that are similar kind of across the board, but then there are so many variables from person to person that's why, medications aren't always the best answer because they've got more things going on than just that one medication can effectively deal with. So what we do with our clients is a couple of things. One, we want, obviously the basic lab stuff, and we want to kind of see what's going on with thyroid and iron levels and some of the nutrients that we know are involved. And so then we start to understand that piece. And then we start to talk to our clients and they tell us, okay, well, these are the patterns that I notice. It starts in the morning and it gets progressively worse, or I wake up in the middle of the night with one. The timing of their migraine, the symptoms that go along with it, the symptoms that come before and after, the symptoms that are completely unrelated to migraine, but maybe have to do with their hormones or their mood. All of those give us clues as to the imbalances that are going on in their body. And so we're looking for symptom patterns. We're looking for migraine patterns. We're looking for time of day patterns. We're looking for seasonal patterns. So there are patterns that we can find evolving or emerging when we start to pay attention. And each of those patterns, when you understand the significance that they have as far as the time of day, the time of your cycle, all of those things can really point into the areas that are problematic. And then we do also some functional testing as well. So we're taking a look at hormones, neurotransmitters, adrenal levels, and cortisol levels. And once we have all of that information, takes us a couple of months to really get a good picture of what's going on. Then we have a roadmap moving forward. We know exactly what we need to work on. We know how it's affecting their body. And then we can start implementing that plan to helping them get, actual long-lasting relief, because we're treating the things that are out of balance that are contributing to their migraines in the first place.
Tanya, what I realize, everybody say, okay, that's a stress. Migraine is a stress, but they don't actually talk about the stress. They just thought that stress is something emotional,
Right.
something happening like external stress about your work or something related to anger, But stress can actually relate to so many things, right? Even any imbalances create a stress, right? So any hormone imbalance, any metabolic chaos, anything in the body can make cause this stress for the body.
Yeah.
And as somebody who do the functional medicine and PTSD for myself, PTSD coaching and functional medicine, I just realized there are a lot of related causes of migraine to even childhood trauma. Because
Yes.
these traumas stay in your cells, and you think that, oh, okay, I'm going to take these pills and then I'm going to remove this stress forever, but it's not going to be there because this is there deeply. And by the time you don't heal those stress, don't heal those root causes, is not going to remove there. So I what I like about naturopathy is just you have a really big assessment of the PTSD and emotional traumas, talking about the childhood trauma, because I work with naturopath doctors as well, and I had a lot of people in this field talking in this podcast. So do you also do the same assessment
Yeah.
for emotional traumas?
Yes, that's actually we have a module on that, and really understanding the connection between, I mean, there's a huge body of research on the link between not just migraine, but, fibromyalgia, chronic illnesses, right? And childhood traumas. And so it's very interesting to kind of cite that research and help people understand, like, that it's not something that just happened in your past. And even people who think that they've gotten over it, but they don't want to talk about it, right? Which, when there's any reluctance to talk about or revisit something that was stressful for you, I mean, nobody wants to, go out and just announce it. But if you feel like you can't talk about what happened, you're not done processing it, and you're holding on to that. And so we kind of talk about that, and having them, assess their own reactions when they think about this childhood trauma or whatever they experienced. What comes up for them? Is it something that they still shy away from? Like, they don't want to think about it. They don't want to really come near it. In which case, then we need to reopen that, and we need to look at, okay, we're not done with this. And in fact, I have a client right now who we decided to have her take some extra time and really focus in on some of the things that she was dealing with emotionally, because without that fundamental piece, you can't see the physical healing that we want to have happen. The emotional stuff has to come first. And I mean, it's easy to say, sure, let's deal with it. And it takes years and years and years. So there is stuff that we can do to help support that healing process in the meantime, but it's painful and it's hard, but it's something that has to be gone through.
Because it's not easy, Tanya. I know homeopathy do the same thing.
Hmm.
Like they try to open up those traumas,
Yeah.
but you want to forget,
Yeah.
right? Somebody
Right.
who already they tell that they already passed this, but they haven't, because if
Hmm.
it was processed, they couldn't get it right now, right? So they may have some issues from the past, and we have to open up and we have to talk about this.
Yeah.
So that's why it's so important you connect with your practitioner or
Mhm.
your doctor, because sometimes there is no connection. You just go there, you just take the medication, and that's it.
Right.
So that's the reason people are not really comfortable to take this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's very true.
yeah. So I love to know about different types of migraine, and go deeply into it. I know there are emotional and there are internal stressors as well, but can you categorize them?
So there's a couple different ways of looking at it. I mean, there's definitely different diagnostic types of migraines. You can have vestibular migraines, you can have silent migraines, you can have, just plain old run-of-the-mill migraine. But each of those have kind of their own unique constellation of things contributing to it. So the type of migraine that you experience can actually also give us clues as to some of the underlying issues, because that we know that neurotransmitters like acetylcholine and glutamate really affect the vestibular system. And so when there's a lot of dizziness or a lot of, or you have vestibular migraine, then we know, okay, we need to take a look at what's going on with that glutamate GABA neurotransmitter pathway. They are kind of like a seesaw, right? When one's high, usually the other is low, and vice versa. So we want to look at that balance. We want to take a look at, what's acetylcholine doing for you, which is again another neurotransmitter. And so the different diagnoses of the types of migraine can actually give us a lot of information. But then, we're looking at most people that I work with, they tend to have just kind of the standard diagnosis of just general migraine. And we're really looking at, I mentioned those patterns. So for example, our hormones and, not only our stress hormones, but our cortisol, our neurotransmitters, different things peak and trough during the day, our circadian rhythm, right? And so we can tell based on the timing that you're having the migraine during the day, we can kind of hone in on the fact that, maybe a middle of the night migraine could be related to low blood pressure, can be related to low cortisol, can be related to low serotonin, can be related to low oxygen. So a lot of people are undiagnosed with sleep apnea, huge thing that needs to be screened for in people with chronic migraine. And so there are a lot of things, around that middle of the night waking that can be different than, say, someone who gets a migraine at, in the afternoon when they've been at work, the lights and sounds that can trigger it, the stress that they've been going through. Again, maybe it is blood sugar. If they haven't eaten lunch, the low blood sugar drops. And so we have like a collection of maybe 5 or 6 different things based on time of day that we want to take a closer look at and start really tracking. All right, is it a diet thing? Is it because you're not eating enough food through the day? Is it because of stress and your cortisol levels are skyrocketing? Or is it more because of your adrenaline, your epinephrine, norepinephrine that's spiking? So then we can kind of start honing in and narrow it down until we finally get that picture. And combining it with the lab work really helps to give us a very good picture of what's going on for that particular person. The other thing that I'd like to mention is that different people have different migraines. So what I mean by that is you have somebody who has, 10 plus migraine days a month. A migraine is a migraine is a migraine. When we're in pain, like we're not paying attention to what we're experiencing. We're just in pain. But when you really start to focus on the symptoms that come along with it and really start to kind of tease out, all right, well, this migraine starts in the morning and it feels like somebody's stabbing me behind the eyes, versus, well, this one starts in the evening after I've relaxed and I feel super fatigued and really depressed. Those types of things can tell us, all right, well, then you've got at least two different migraines. And the triptan that might work for your morning migraine isn't going to work for the evening migraine, and vice versa, because they're two different, the underlying causes are two different things. And so that's why it can be so frustrating for people that sometimes their medication works and sometimes it doesn't. And they're like, I don't understand. And it's because you're trying to treat two different types of migraines with the same medication, and that doesn't always work.
And I think it's not only migraine. Sometimes you only have headache, right?
Correct.
You have to, because sometimes when I eat late, or when I'm very very exhausted, I
Yeah.
get headache. And the
Yep.
only thing I do, I never take pills. I just have to rest. That's it.
Yeah.
And my gut is very disturbed as well. So
Mhm.
that's the thing that happened with my migraine. I'm not saying I don't have migraine. So maybe in a year I get few times headache
Yeah.
because of these causes, and I know these causes.
Yeah.
But when we talk about constant migraine, that means there is something going on in your body, and you have to know about this, because
Right.
unfortunately sometimes some of these headaches are very dangerous, because sometimes you may have cancer, unfortunately, or something that it's too late to cure. So you shouldn't actually wait for that time just getting the pills. So it's better, because when we have constant pain, you say, okay, that's it, I'm gonna get the pill, and then I will be okay. But if it's repeating, you have to be more aware of your body.
Yes, and that's a really good point. I mean, anytime somebody has a new onset of pain, especially if it's a continuous thing, that definitely needs to be worked up for something on the scary lines, right? We want to rule out all the scary things first. And generally the people that I end up seeing, they've had the MRIs, they've done all of the stuff. It's been going on for 20 years. So they don't, it's not a cancer thing, it's not a tumor or a mass of any sort. It's just the biochemistry that's out of balance. But definitely, I have spoken with a few people. They said, well, the migraine started a couple months ago and it just hit me out of nowhere, and now it just won't stop. I'm like, you need to get to the doctor now and get worked up to make sure that it's not something else more concerning than just a migraine, right? That it's not some sort of a cardiovascular issue, or it's not, like you said, cancer or something else like that. So,
So give me some case studies of the worst case study you had, and it was healed.
yeah. Yeah, I had one lady. I won't use names, but I had one client. She had been struggling with migraines since she was in her early 20s, and she was in her early 50s when we connected. She was having a migraine every day, um, and her medication worked maybe 15% of the time. Other than that, she just kind of had to lay in bed, and her life was pretty limited, and it was very disheartening. And so we worked together for about a little over the 6 months that I typically work with people, because she was a pretty severe case. Um, and then she was starting, it always starts with a lessening of the intensity before frequency happens, right? So instead of a 10 out of 10 or 11 out of 10 pain, it's a 7 out of 10, and then it starts to become like a 5 out of 10. And so it becomes more manageable. And then we start seeing medications working more effectively than they used to, so that their triptans actually start working. And then we start seeing, periods throughout the day. And this is what her story was. She started having periods of pain-free through the day. So she'd have a couple hours here and there, which she hadn't had in, over a decade. And then from there it started going into days stretches. So she went 48 hours and then 72 hours without pain. And so this is a gradual process as her body is continuing to heal. And then she had some personal things come up. She kind of left the program for about 2 to 3 months, and this was a few months ago, so this was probably in March. And so then I was just curious about her. I hadn't heard from her, didn't know what was going on. So I reached out to her, and she's like, I have been migraine free now for the last 3 months. She is doing amazing. She has been, taking care of her mom, who's really sick. So she's had a lot of stress lately, and still her migraine hasn't come back. So, it's just to have somebody who's almost bedridden going to be a primary caregiver for her sick mom and having no pain through it. It's just, it seems like a miraculous cure. But really, again, when we focus in on the right things, it's not a miracle. It's just we're balancing your body and your biochemistry.
What was her problem
What's that?
exactly? What was her problem exactly?
So her problem, so it's always a combination. She had low cortisol levels. Her blood pressure was too low. There were some dietary things, and we needed to work on some gut health. And what was she had some neurotransmitter imbalances as well. I want to say it was serotonin and dopamine, and glutamate, actually, all three of them. So we focused in specifically on those things for her. And of course, there's always the basics, like we need to get good sleep, we need to stay well hydrated. So we always work on those basics that everybody should be doing. But then on top of that, we needed to focus in on some of the cortisol stuff and the neurotransmitter, the glutamate, the dopamine, and the serotonin specifically for her. And then really find out, okay, what foods are problematic for you based on your neurotransmitter imbalances, right? So we know that certain foods will stimulate certain neurotransmitters. And if you have too much of those that's contributing to your migraines, we need to kind of work on cutting back some of those foods that can trigger that neurotransmitter production, and then work on kind of how your body is able to process it, and then adding that food back in. And I want to say that is a supremely important piece, is that it's okay and it's necessary to restrict for a short period of time. But I run across so many people who just keep restricting food, keep restricting, because everything feels like it triggers a migraine for them. And that's the only thing they have control over. So then they come to us and they've got a handful of foods they can eat, and then they become malnourished, right? And so then we start seeing nutrient deficiency confounding that problem. And so, so it can be really confusing. Like, how can we open up your diet without triggering things, support those pathways? We ideally want it to be through food rather than supplements, but initially it has to be through supplements as we're working on everything, right? So
Exactly.
it's definitely a process, but that's where we're able to kind of say, all right, well, here's step 1, 2, and 3. Let's work on these. All right, good. Now we're ready for 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah,
And
because
keep
body
moving.
is the whole, right? That's
That's
what
right.
I do as well. Like, as you say, cortisol is a very interesting element in the body
Yeah.
because and unfortunately not every time they check the cortisol because they think that's not necessary. But cortisol, if it's low, you are exhausted, and this exhaustion, if you don't have enough energy, you cannot exercise, or especially when you have kids, I'm saying.
Mhm.
When you have a small kids, it happens as well.
Yeah.
So low cortisol is a very big factor in
A
opening
lot.
so many diseases
Yeah.
because it's catabolic.
Yep.
It can actually break down your cells, right? So that's why with low cortisol level, we may get cancer, we may get a lot of disease, but it can be controlled.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm saying, I always, like, my real purpose of this podcast is just showing other people that holistic medicine is a great thing.
That's right.
So I always say medical science is great, is a science, right? But not every time doctors go to all the hidden layers. They don't do the whole panel because they think that is not necessary.
Right.
right? But sometimes when we have this pain for long time, like for years, why do we have to fight with this? Like why don't we go to somewhere like analyze our body? I talked to somebody, it's interesting. She said, I had some problem in my eyes. And then I went to doctor, medical doctor. They diagnosed something. It was not that. And then holistically, I went through different part of my body to see what's the problem with my eyes. That's not a really good sign, right? And I said there is other ways. You can go to functional medicine. You can go to naturopath doctor, because they go through the whole body.
Mhm.
It's right. But when you have eyes, it's not that you're blind or you're getting some eye problem for your vision. You may have some other imbalances. That's so interesting that the chemicals of each person is
Mhm.
different,
Yeah,
and the symptoms is just the surface, just
right.
the surface of that real problem.
Yeah, I always think of our symptoms as our body's kind of sign language, right? It's the language of our body trying to tell us what's wrong. But, if we don't have somebody that can interpret that for us, we just think that it's just talking to us in an unpleasant way. We don't really like it, so we just ignore it as much as possible, right? Until you can't ignore it anymore. And one thing that I would like to say, to add on to what you said, is there's also a difference in testing and in lab ranges. So when we're looking at someone with, for example, with chronic migraine, the studies show that what would be considered a normal range for somebody who, just a general, healthy person that doesn't have any issues, is different than what it should be for someone with chronic migraine. And they actually find that if you're on the lower end of the normal range, it actually contributes to, for this thyroid medicine, hormone, that it contributes to an increased frequency and intensity of migraine. And so even though you're considered normal, you are not where you should be for a person with migraine based on the research that we have. So the lab ranges are different. The same thing goes for iron levels, same thing goes for B12 levels, same thing goes for the size of your red blood cells. So there should be a different normal range. Unfortunately, there isn't. And then the other thing is the way that we test. So blood tests can give us a ton of information. But for example, cortisol, if you were to do a cortisol level, it's very hard to see an overall picture of what your cortisol level is doing through the day. So unless you're actually in a diseased state where you have deficiency in cortisol, which is a medically treatable condition, but unless you fit in that box, you're considered normal. And so the functional testing that we can do is through urine, and then it looks at the breakdown product of the cortisol and helps us understand how your body is utilizing it. You can do a 24-hour urine test through your regular doctor, but usually they'll do blood testing. Blood testing won't tell us anything. We need at least a 24-hour urine collection to see, are you within that normal range or are you below it? And so again, knowing which type of test for which thing you're testing is also extremely important to get the data that you need to really understand what's going on with your body.
And the saliva testing also, saliva
Yes.
testing
Well,
for
so
the
I
whole
use
body. Yeah,
salivary testing, but
yeah, yeah,
most doctors don't do salivary or urinary testing. They just
yeah.
do blood work. Yeah.
Unfortunately not. But as you said, because when you are in a lower range, it means your body compensating to get back to normal. And when this process just take time and is repeating, there is no way you get back to the normal.
Right.
It's not easy to compensate. So when you are in acute level, it means you are in the cortisol is just trying to get back, but
Right.
is not, and then compensating and there is a way that you can balance your body again,
Mhm.
and hopefully you're not late. Right. So what do you have in your website? I can see you have Instagram, Facebook, website. What do you exactly have there?
Yeah. So on Facebook, I have just my, general business page. And I use that for kind of all of the Facebook lives. I team up with a neurologist from Stanford, and we do what we call point counterpoint. So she's very holistic in her neurology approach, and she specializes in migraines as well. So we have great conversations from an MD versus ND perspective, and just different options on kind of treating and managing migraines. So a lot of those videos are posted there. We have a private group just for people with migraines that you can join, and we like to try to add as much resources and different things that we can to help support everybody as they go through their migraine journey. I'll be honest, Instagram, we post maybe once every couple of months. It's not
Yeah,
very
me too.
active there for people who like Instagram. And then on our website, we have a bunch of different things. So, there's information on how you can sign up to work with us. We have different, protocols and like PDFs. I call them our mini ebook series. So we've got 4 or 5 different things on lab guides, on, the 5 things that you should be looking at for people with migraine, all of those kinds of things to help kind of give you more information from a holistic standpoint, and things that you can bring to your doctor to kind of start working through some of that. And so that can all be found on the website.
Great. Give me one sentence of hope to somebody who suffers from migraine.
Yeah. That I know that you've tried everything and nothing works. So I know the skepticism, right? I hear it all the time. And this is more than one sentence, but my sentence of hope would be that with the right approach, it is not an incurable disease. It is very well controlled. I said I had daily headaches and migraines for 15 years. I have been 7 years migraine free now. So if I can do it, if my client that I shared can do it, you can do it too. It's just a matter of finding a doctor or a team of doctors who are going to work with you to help figure out what's going on for you.
I love this topic. I love talking to you. And I really love this podcast because I can connect to real people who can help, and they dedicated their time for the patients to help them go through great healing and have a great happy life. Thank you so much, Tanya, for being here.
Thank you.
Please subscribe to Quantum Calhoun Transition channel and order my book The Gap in Amazon. Thank you for watching.